All right, so breaking just moments ago, President Trump with a whole lot to say about Iran on his way from the White House to an event in Florida. President Trump telling our own Peter Doocy he's weighing his options about what to do next.
Had the CENTCOM commander come in here yesterday. Was he briefing you on a different approach, options? What kind of options? How would it look different?
There are options. I mean, do we want to go and just blast the hell out of him and finish him forever, or do we want to try and make a deal? I mean, those are the options.
Do you want to go blast the hell out of him?
I'd
and
prefer
finish him
not.
forever?
On a human basis, I'd prefer not, but that's the option. Do we want to go in there heavy and just blast them away, or do we want to do something? They're a very disjointed unitship, as you can understand, Peter, very disjointed. I mean, they're not getting along with each other, and it puts us in a bad position. One group wants to make a certain deal, the other group wants to make a certain deal, including the hardliners. The hardliners want to make a deal, too. Why wouldn't they? They have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft, they have no nothing.
Well, it was a news-filled departure for President Trump as he makes his way to Florida now. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith on this Friday in New York. John, good to be with you.
Good to make it to the end of the week with you, Sandra. I'm John Roberts in Washington. This is America Reports. Iranian state media reporting Tehran sent its new proposal through Pakistan, claiming its top priority is peace. But President Trump says it's been hard to get any sort of concrete deal because it's hard to tell who's running the country.
We are going to dig into all of this and much more with White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly joining us in moments.
First, though, to Lucas Tomlinson, who's live on the ground in Dubai with the very latest from the region. Hi, Lucas.
Good afternoon, John. The UAE celebrating its first day OPEC-free. As we just heard from President Trump leaving the White House, he says he's not happy with this latest proposal from Iran. Here he was just a few minutes ago.
In terms of the negotiation telephonically, they've made strides, but I'm not sure if they ever get there.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calling the Iranian regime sewer rats in his post on X, also adding the United States has complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. There is a hard currency, i.e. the U.S. dollar shortage. Food and gasoline rationing are in place. And the entire international community has turned against you, and the blockade will continue until there is pre-February 27 freedom of navigation. President Trump calling the nearly 3-week-old blockade a success. The U.S. Military Central Command said it has turned away 44 ships. Others remain pierside in Iran, others at anchor. The U.S. Navy's blockade has made life even more miserable from Iran's 93 million people. As you can see by this chart, some think Iran's economy is on the verge of destruction. And Americans back home also feeling the effects of the war. The national average of the price of gasoline is the highest in 4 years. In an effort to fill the gap, U.S. crude oil exports have hit record highs, surpassing 6 million barrels a day. But General Jack Keane warned this morning he thinks the war is at a stalemate.
I do think we'll probably move on and do something here other than the blockade, because the blockade in of itself, I don't believe is going to force any concessions out of these people, given who they really are.
When the president was asked what part of Iran's offer he didn't like, he said Iran is asking for things that I can't agree to. John?
Yeah, one of them, I think, is to maintain its nuclear program. We'll see. Lucas Tomlinson for us, kicking us out from Dubai. Thank you, Lucas. Sandra?
All right, John, thank you. Let's bring in White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly. Welcome to the program. Good to have you here. Very newsy departure for the president just a few moments ago at the sunny White House as he makes his way down to sunny Florida. I want to pick up where Lucas just left off, Anna, and ask you about President Trump saying that Iran is asking for things that I can't agree with. Can you give us any more color as to exactly what that is and what the conversations are?
Well, sure. I'll say that Iran is absolutely desperate to make a deal. Of course, they have been totally decimated militarily. The United States military totally obliterated their ballistic missiles, their production facilities, weakened their proxies, achieved all of the goals outlined under Operation Epic Fury. And now they are being totally strangled economically, partially through the tremendously successful blockade that is causing them to lose $500 million in revenue every single day. And a lot of those oil tankers that were once headed to Iranian ports, now they are headed to the big, beautiful Gulf of America, filling up on American American oil. So while the Iranian regime is getting weaker and weaker, the United States is getting stronger and stronger. And so the president has all the cards, as he said. He was not satisfied with their latest proposal because, rest assured, this president has an incredible track record of only making good deals for the American people. And any deal will ensure that this long and short-term threat posed by a nuclear Iran is eliminated for good.
And unfortunate timing there with the Park Service lighting up the lawnmower.
Always.
Hope you can hear us all right. So Lucas Tomlinson talked about this a short time ago. Gas prices in this country are not as high as they were in the Biden administration, but creeping up there. $4.39 current average compared to $4.05 a week ago and $3.19 a year ago. This is what the president said yesterday on gas prices.
The gas will go down. As soon as the war's over, it'll drop like a rock. There's so much of it. It's all over the place, sitting all over the oceans of the world. And it'll go down. But what won't happen is if Iran had a nuclear weapon and used it, then the whole world is a different place.
Clearly, the world would be a different place if Iran got hold of a nuclear weapon. But right now, the economic situation for many Americans is becoming a different place because of the price of gas. How long does the president expect that these high gas prices will be with us? And what does he say to people who are having trouble putting gas in the tank?
Well, look, the president has been clear-eyed all along the way about the short-term temporary disruptions that would occur as a result of Iran's attempts to subvert the free flow of energy in the Strait of Hormuz. But the good news is that this president built just over the past year and in his first term a strong and resilient economy that, as he said, is not only going to send us back to where we were before, but better than we ever were before. Of course, America is now the largest producer of oil than anybody in the world. So as I said earlier, a lot of those tankers are now headed to buying American oil, and this economy is going to be able to bounce back even better than before once this long-term volatility presented by a nuclear threatening Iran is eliminated for good.
Anna, can I circle back where we started as you were detailing how the strategy on the part of the United States and President Trump has dismantled the Iranian economy, crippled it, as the president continues to detail. But specifically to what he just said, when he said, quote, that Iran is asking for things I can't agree with. What specifically is Iran asking for that the president can't agree with?
Well, obviously, I'm not able to go beyond what the president was comfortable saying there. But of course, these are ongoing diplomatic conversations. They continue. And remember, the president has been clear, not just over the past year, but over his entire career. Iran is a country that for 47 years has chanted death to America, has threatened our troops, killed Americans overseas. The president isn't going to allow that to happen anymore. So any agreement is going to ensure the long and short-term safety of the American homeland and our troops overseas. But I'll leave it to the president to get into further detail.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.